Hello and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to create these supplement containers using Adobe Photoshop to create the 3D objects, and then you can place them in Adobe Dimension if you have that program. Just a preface here, if you already know how to use a 3D program, feel free to skip this. This is intended for users who are most familiar with Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop and those interfaces. In the description below, I'll be posting a link to the working files, which are available by donation and help support my time in creating these tutorials and making the files available. Thanks in advance for your consideration. Let's hop over into Illustrator, where I've got a couple of examples that I was referencing. The first object I'm going to be creating is this jar, and we're going to start with the lid by making a circle. You can tap L on the keyboard or go to your circle, click, and holding Shift create the circle. What I've done to create the flutes is copy the circle, Command C or Control C on a PC, Command F to paste in place, and I'm going to give this a stroke, take off the fill, and we're going to make the stroke white. We're going to make it dashed. The stroke panel, if you don't have that open, go to Window, Stroke, click the dashed line. We're going to make it capped, rounded joint, increase the weight so you can see it and zoom in. And here you can adjust the gap and the dash size. We do want a 0 dash, and your gap, depending on how many flutes you want, can be spaced out. In my instance, I've got, let's call it a 10-point gap. And I've got the weight, you can adjust that as needed if you want smaller or thicker flutes. I've got mine at 4 point. This is going to depend on the dimensions you're working in. I am working in pixels right now, so your measurements might be slightly different if you're working on a print document. So next we need to create a working copy of this in case we need to edit it later for another jar. Selecting both objects, I'm going to go to Object, Expand Appearance, Object, Expand again. We're going to expand both fill and stroke. And next, go to your Pathfinder, Window Pathfinder. And the shape mode we want is minus front. It's second from the left. So now we have got just this shape. So we're going to copy it, Command C, go over into Photoshop, and you're going to want to go to the 3D Workspace. Up here at the top, select 3D Workspace, and in my Layers tab, I'm going to paste this, Command V. Let's do it as a shape layer. Sometimes when I paste it in, if you do it as a smart object, it can lose some of the fine points. So by doing a shape layer, I found helps retain the small details. Now that we have our shape, go to the 3D tab, go to 3D Extrusion, Create. Next, with the shape selected, I'm going to adjust the extrusion depth, and you can look back at your reference file to see how tall those are. Some of these are a little bit shorter with narrower flute in between, and some are a little bit taller or wider apart. Just going to show you the example so you can adjust yours as needed. You can type in exact values also. Going to hit enter, If you need to pan around the object, you can click on the Orbit 3D camera to get back to your initial camera view. Just click in the 3D tab, Default Camera. With the shape selected, I want to go to the coordinates and make the x-axis 90 degrees so I can see what's happening from the side view. You can also work with your secondary window. If you don't see this secondary window, you can go to View, Show, 3D Secondary View, and using this little corner icon, you can swap between views. So now let's go ahead and create the bottom part of the lid, which is going to be very easy now because we have our working circle, which is the same width if you haven't resized it. So I'm selecting just the black circle, copy, Command C, Command V, and you can do shape layer again. We're going to do the same 3D extrusion, create, and I'm going to go to the coordinates and rotate this one also 90 degrees. As long as you haven't resized any objects, you can go ahead and place this where it needs to go. And to make this one object, you can select both layers in your Layers tab and go to View, Merge 3D Layers, and now these will act as one object. If you need to get back into that, just double click on the shape in Layers and you'll be taken right back to both working parts if you need to resize anything. So now we can treat this, the fluted part and the non-fluted part, as one object, and we can rotate those together. And if you need to get back, just go to your 3D default camera. Next, I'm going to create the jar, or the bottle. And this is the shape that I created before. And what I've done is zoomed in, and with the pen tool, P, on your keyboard, you can draw this out by clicking, or you can look at the parts and using the border radius tool. This is how I've created it, by creating a rectangle. I'm going to switch that to a stroke. And you can, using your direct select white arrow, you can select a corner and change the radius here and here. And I'm going to delete this line. Let's direct select this line and move it back in to about halfway. Now I'm going to zoom in and add anchor points with the plus sign, or add anchor point. And where that happens, I'm going to add a couple points. Direct select tool. Direct select that point. and remove it. Now I'm going to select both points, align them to the top vertically, and I want to remove any curvature. So up here at the top, we can change that to a corner, drag in the handle here, select those points, align left. If you need to tweak that anymore, that's looking pretty good on my side. So now that I have my shape created, and you can delete this line if you'd like with the direct select tool. Next, we're going to select the entire object with our black arrow. We're going to do Object, Path, Offset Path, and we're going to want a negative offset. So I'm using my arrow up and down arrow keys. Let's do a -2 pixel offset. Again, this is relative to the dimensions or units I'm using. And if I change the opacity of that image and lock it, you can work with just this outline. So what we need to happen here is I'm going to delete these two lines with my direct select tool. Align these two, align those 2 points. And with those points selected, I'm going to do Command J or Control J on a PC to join. Here I'm going to align these and also join, Command J. Next, with the object selected, convert that to a fill, and we've created this bottle shape. Let's copy the object. So what I've done is make sure that this is hollow on the inside and that the rotation we're going to copy that. Command V into Photoshop. This time we're going to do 3D extrusion, create, I'm going to go ahead and hide the powder jar since we're not creating that one. And on the extrusion, here on our properties panel, we can scroll down to this revolve shape. And we want our extrusion depth. I'm going to type in 0, enter, and I'm going to make that up just a tick until I don't see make sure there's not a 0, to make sure there is not any little stray pieces showing up here. So we don't want a hole in the middle, and we don't want any little marks that might show up in our 3D object. The next object we're going to make is the screw top of the jar, if you need it. So back in Illustrator, you could create these objects in Photoshop if you're comfortable there. I'm most comfortable in Illustrator. So for the screw top, I've created a ring. So let's do that with the circle tool, L on the keyboard, the ellipse. And I tried to keep these sizes relative to each other for at least the lid part. So I can compare that of how it's going to be sized and give me less to try to do in Photoshop later. And you can either create this ring with the stroke. You can either create the ring shape by expanding a stroke, or if you wanted to use the offset again, you could do it that way. So I'm going to do Object, Expand Appearance, and now we've got the ring. In order to make the screw, I've made a couple little points or little circles and adjusted those equally around the edge. You could also make those little squares. It just depends on how sharp you want the spirals to be. I'm going to go ahead with the circle. And zoom in. If you want to make sure these are exactly centered, you could go into Outline View, Command Y, or View will toggle Outline and Preview mode. Zoom way in, and you can align this to the center. I'm going to do that again over here. And I can get both of those, and holding down Option, drag those to the bottom. Okay, now I'm going to go back to preview mode. I don't need that one. I'm going to select all, group, Command G, and make a copy, holding down Option. And I'm going to merge these into one compound path using Pathfinder, Unite, copy the shape, paste as a shape layer, and on this one I'm going to do an extrusion. Change the depth, go to the coordinates and make this 90 degrees again on the x-axis. Enter. And to get the taper view, here you can see our top view. You can swap views here too. To get the twist of this screw part of the bottle, we're going to go to Deform, and we're going to increase the twist. So you can do this either way if you want twist to the right or twist to the left. And you can wind that as tightly as you would like. To get to this property, you can also tap, if you're not in a number, you can tap V on the keyboard, and that will cycle you through each of these properties. So here is the taper and the bend. Where you can tweak that. I'm going to undo. I really just wanted the twist for this one. When you're happy with that one, you can click out of it. And I'm going to merge all of my layers so they're going to merge all of my layers to treat them as one object, and I'm going to rename my layers. so I can find them more easily. So I'm going to select all of my layers and go to 3D, merge 3D layers. And if I double click, it'll take me to the 3D tab. And unfortunately, we'll have to rename our layers again. I'm going to group these two shapes. And now I can select both of these layers, and if you're on the Move V tool, if you're on the Move tool, you can select multiple layers and use alignment tools to align these. And if you want to select them independently, you can scale them. So I'm selecting all my layers, tapping the V key, and I'm going to try to align all of these. Now I'm going to select independently and try to scale these. So my cap and lid are the right scale to one another. Need to flip my lid. So the bottle, so I need to scale, and you can reorder your layers too. I'm going to scale these three objects by tapping by holding down Shift and choosing a scale. By hovering until I see Scale Uniformly, hold down Shift. And Scale Uniformly. I'm going to hover until I see Scale Uniformly. I'm clicking and dragging down. And now I'm gonna layer these. And you can swap your views if you'd like. And hide layers as you need to. Now if I go to my layers panel, I've got my fluted lid. I'm going to go to default camera. And in the coordinates, I'm going to click on fluted lid, which is actually bottle now that I've combined everything. And in my coordinates, I'm going to move this to the ground. And make sure somehow I lost my fluted lid. So now if I orbit around, you can see I've got the fluted lid. And in my layers panel, with that object selected, I'm going to go to 3D, export 3D layer, select wavefront OBJ, you can keep everything else the same. And it's going to save out textures and materials for you, which we're not going to need in this. So here are a bunch of the layers it's saved. I don't need those in this instance. The only file I really need out of that is the .obj, which now we can drag and drop. And hit F on the keyboard to frame it. So now you can start dragging on your materials. Or individually. So now when you click on your layers, you can see, and I can do a better job of, you can rename your layers again if you need to. So there is our supplement jar. At this point, you can place a label directly onto the glass jar by dragging and dropping. Otherwise, you can create a label, and to do that, let's go back into Photoshop. I'm going to create a thin rectangle. And in the 3D layer, let's make an extrusion. Using the 360 bend. And we want our extrusion depth to be the same as the width of the jar. So I'm going to select both layers, go to 3D, merge 3D layers. And I need to align all of my objects. You can also hover until you see the scale icon here. And I just barely want it on the exterior. And I can see from the top view that it is aligned to the center. I go ahead and save and re-export the bottle. Here is the new bottle with the label. If this video helped you out, please like the video and subscribe. Thanks for watching.